movie called 1971 if you want to learn about it. You know, I hope we don't have such a systemic and systematic infiltration of media. I pray that we don't, and I don't think we do, I hope, right? So I don't think it's at that level. Nevertheless, there are biases that get built in the system. And what's fascinating, actually, is Anonymous has been all over the news in a way that, for example, animal rights activists have not been in the news and have been demonized and have been tagged terrorists. And the question is, why has Anonymous made it? And again, I have a whole talk about this. Well, they've made it because they're celebrities, sensationalism, Hollywood, exciting, right? And all sorts of things. So there's these proclivities that are not necessarily propaganda, but explain why one thing gets covered and another thing does not get covered, right? So I just think that that Wall Street Journal example is an example of the government trying to seed propaganda in that case, whereas most of the stories coming out of the journalistic world reflect some biases as opposed to being, you know, propaganda or anything like that.
Yeah, no, anyway. By the way, the talk was great. I think it was worth the trip here
Thanks.
just for that
Thank
talk.
you.
So thanks. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you talk about engaging more with hackers and hacker communities. Where do you go in Montreal for like journalists here?
Oh, okay. Well, that's a great question. Well, first of all, I teach a class on hackers, and I am teaching one next fall, which is open to grad students and undergrads on a seminar. There is third Mondays, what's it called?
Team. Third Mondays activism.
Yeah. Third Mondays Activism, which is an event which brings together hackers and advocates and journalists. They have really interesting talks. And actually, I've just started a mailing list called Tech Talks, which is for all tech-related events in Montreal, because there's so many of them, actually. So I think that there's a lot of opportunities for interactions if you want to meet hackers. Mm-hmm.
You talk a lot about how it's kind of like a lot of what hackers does is like revenge. And the way I see it sometimes is like the whole, I know this is cheesy, but like an eye for an eye will like make the world blind. So it's kind of like you have people who maybe have not so great policies doing underhanded, not so great things, but then I also have quite a strong sense of morality in that there's right things and wrong things, and like privacy to me is a right. And hackers, I mean, inherently what they do is they circumnavigate that right, and they take what is not there, in the form of information.
Right.
But as a journalist, I also have this strong sense of knowledge is power, and information should be given to the public if it's bad, because whatever, it's a lot of gray mush in the black and white. But my point is that, do you ever feel like it's too far? Because a lot of what I see, sometimes I'm like, it's like swatting a fly with a sledgehammer.
Right. All right, so first of all, I wouldn't put what WikiLeaks, Snowden, Manning, what they're doing is revenge. Anonymous is a special beast where there have been moments of that, for sure, although I think most of the time it's not revenge-based, it's sort of like there's a political cause, they get involved, right? And I think whenever there's a privacy violation, it needs to be called out, and it's bullshit, and it's wrong. And I will say this very strongly as a supporter of Anonymous, but I'll call them out when they are engaging in that privacy violation. But one of the problems is, when my book came out, a lot of journalists were just like, they brought up this point. And it's a really important point. But I also then started to kind of think about it, and I was like, you know what? Journalists also dox, which is reveal the identities of people when they shouldn't be revealing them, a lot of times. In fact, in 2000, I think it was 14, the largest, or the most important dox, I think, was done by Newsweek when they revealed the supposed name of Satoshi Nakamoto, who they claim to be the founder of Bitcoin, right? And they aired the public...
Well, he is, it's just they didn't have the right guy.
Well, they didn't have the right guy. They still have not said that, though.
Right, oh yeah.
They still, if you go up to their website, we had a public interest motivation, and they have not said that we have the wrong guy. But let's just say they had the right guy. Would it have been okay to air the fact that he had financial troubles, marital troubles? They published his license plate, right? I mean, it was deeply invasive in the way that when, for example, Anonymous hacked into the Bay Area Rapid Transit computers to protest something really obnoxious, police brutality. I thought it was great that they did a website defacement. They get in, put on a new page. The second they release customer data, like, that's wrong. So I think, but the problem is, because Anonymous is like shadowy and creepy, it's very easy to be like, oh, they're in the bad, and Newsweek just doesn't look bad because they're Newsweek. So I think in both instances we have to call out those instances very, very strongly. I think hackers are scary because you can't sue them in the way that you can sue an institution, right? And many of them can just kind of act individually, whereas in the case of Newsweek, you know, presumably she's working with an editor, right? So there's these forms of control. But I absolutely think that if there is a privacy violation done by whoever, it's important to call it out very,
Because
very
it's also
strongly.
like, for me, it's like, under what context did these reporters acquire that information? So, you know, maybe there was snooping, at which point, again, I agree with you, it's a privacy violation. But say it's like a friend of this person saying like, hey, my friend is doing this, I think what he's doing is wrong. Here is this information and this is on the record.
Absolutely. But this was a case where Satoshi was like, don't do this story about me. I'm not the right person, you know?